What makes someone, dedicate their entire life to changing the world, to making things better? It's fascinating, right? Like, what's that spark? And that's what we're going to dig into today. We're going deep into the Grassroots Nation podcast, which, it's this really amazing series that gives you direct access to some of the most prominent leaders in India, people who've committed their lives to, well, social transformation.
It's a rich area to explore, and I know you're all about getting to the core of things quickly and efficiently. I think you'll find this deep dive particularly insightful, especially since Grassroots Nation offers a really unique perspective. It really lets you understand the journeys of those working on the ground, often with the most marginalized communities, tackling really big issues.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like getting this incredible insider view into these inspiring lives. And the way the podcast is structured, it's really well done. They use these personal narratives, almost like oral histories, and they revisit crucial moments in India's development through the eyes of these people who are actively trying to build a better, more equitable future. And I have to say, the traditional Indian music they use as interludes, it really adds to the experience.
It definitely got a distinctive flavor to it. And for our purposes, in this deep dive, the goal is to really distill the key insights, the inspirational elements, the essence of Grassroots Nation, and see what it teaches us about how social change actually happens. Hopefully, it'll give you, the listener, some valuable perspectives on your own engagement with the world around you.
Okay, so let's get into what makes Grassroots Nation so compelling. One thing that really struck me right off the bat is how rare this kind of access is. As they say in the podcast, it's not every day you get to hear from people who've intentionally chosen this path of service to kind of dedicate themselves to their nation, often living behind, more traditional paths, especially to work with communities at the very grassroots level. There's a real sense of respect, I think, that comes through when you hear their stories, people dedicated to creating positive change in all these diverse fields, from agriculture to microfinance, prison reform, and even like building sustainable livelihoods.
It's really about the human connection, isn't it? It's not just about theory or abstract ideas. You're hearing directly from the people who are out there making change happen, getting their hands dirty. For you, as a listener, it's a chance to really grasp the practical aspects of contributing to positive change by diving into the lives, the work, and the core beliefs of these Indian changemakers. You get a much richer, a more complete picture. And the way the podcast does it, revisiting key moments in India's history through their eyes, it reveals the catalysts, those defining moments that sparked their commitment.
And the range of individuals they feature is impressive. They've had Dr. Abhay and Dr. Rani Bang, who are pioneers in community health, Murray and Stantha Kakara, who've championed tribal rights, Dr. Darshan Shankar, who focuses on traditional knowledge, Majid Darwala, who delves into the justice system, and Vijay Mahajan, a real innovator in rural credit. The sheer diversity really drives home the point that there's no single blueprint for creating impact within the Indian social sector, which is incredibly valuable, especially if you're thinking about how to contribute responsibly.
Exactly. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Each individual comes with their own unique experiences, their own motivations, their own areas of focus. And to give you a more concrete sense of this, Grassroots Nation actually recommends a few specific episodes that they feel are particularly illustrative. I think they're great examples of the diverse approaches we're talking about.
Okay, yeah, let's get into those. They suggest starting with episode 20, which features Mari Thigakakara. She's a writer and a driving force behind Accord. In this episode, she's talking with Dr. Rupa Devadasan, and they really delve into her life's journey in social action, specifically her work with tribal communities in Gudalur. They focus on the rights and empowerment of Dalit and Adivasi people. And the conversation explores the things that shaped her thinking, from her student days to her work on the ground.
What's really interesting about Martha Kakara's story is the depth of her commitment, how deeply she's embedded within the community she serves. It's not about quick fixes or superficial interventions. It's about understanding those deep-seated systemic issues and working hand in hand with marginalized communities to build sustainable change. There's a quote from that episode that really sums up her philosophy. We never wanted to build and build and build and become huge and start an empire like a lot of NGOs do. And we said, that's one thing we're never going to do.
That's powerful, isn't it? It shows a very different approach, perhaps even counterintuitive. It suggests prioritizing genuine impact over, just getting bigger, and makes you question what really drives social impact work. Is it about scale and visibility, or is it about creating meaningful, lasting change within a community, even if it means staying relatively small?
Absolutely. It gets to the heart of how we define success and effectiveness in the social sector. For Maya Tikekara, it's deeply tied to the quality of the work. to those relationships built within the community, to the authenticity of the engagement, and less about just, measuring how big the organization is. It's a very different, very grounded model.
Okay, so Grassroots Nation also points to episode 11, which features Professor Madhav Gadgil, a really well-respected ecologist. He's having a conversation with Professor Guru Dasnolkar, and they explore his extensive research in the Western Ghats, as well as his, broader views on ecology. It sounds like they get into his early influences, his academic path, and his work on environmental policy and conservation.
Professor Gaggiel brings in a whole other perspective on creating positive change, this time centered on the environment and that crucial relationship between people and nature. His research in the Western Ghats, which is, a globally important biodiversity hotspot, has been absolutely critical to understanding its value and advocating for its protection. And he actually highlights a key aspect of his early development in this quote. So not only did I become very fascinated by the birds and beasts in the forests, but also by the people and their culture, which is, I believe, an unusual combination.
That's such an important point. To look at the natural world, not in isolation, but in connection with the people who live there, interact with it. It's particularly relevant, I think, as we face these really complex environmental challenges. It suggests that effective conservation has to understand and respect the needs and practices of the people who actually live in those environments.
Exactly. It emphasizes that connection between ecological and social well-being. It shows why we need that holistic perspective when we're making environmental policies, one that combines science with a deep appreciation for the social and cultural context. It's a good reminder that creating positive change can also mean advocating for policies that protect our planet, our limited resources.
Okay, and the last episode Grassroots Nation recommends is episode 15, featuring Vijay Mahajan, who's the CEO of the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation. He also founded Presidan and BASEX, both influential organizations working on livelihoods and economic empowerment. In his conversation with Preeti Sahai, they trace his journey in creating impactful initiatives. The conversation apparently covers his early inspirations, the evolution of his work with rural communities, and his work in microfinance.
Bijay Mahajan brings in another key aspect of social change, and that's economic empowerment, helping marginalized communities build sustainable livelihoods. His work with Pradian and Basics has been instrumental in showing the power of microfinance and social enterprise, giving people the tools to lift themselves out of poverty. And he makes a really interesting point in this quote. If I'm into this bug about improving effectiveness, then the entity whose effectiveness I should improve is not some poor NGOs who are already doing their best in some ways, but the Sarkar.
Wow, that's a strong statement. It really shifts the focus, right? It's not just about what NGOs can do, it's about the role of the government in driving change and making its own systems more effective. It makes you think about the different levels where change can happen, from grassroots all the way up to government policy.
Exactly. It raises important questions about how we scale up impact, how we make it sustainable. Grassroots efforts are critical, but Mahajan suggests that real, widespread change might require working with, even influencing, government structures and policies. It's an argument for a more systemic approach to solving big problems.
So it sounds like the Grassroots Nation podcast is a must listen for anyone interested in what motivates leaders in those diverse paths they take to create impact. It seems perfect for those who enjoy those in-depth conversations, those personal stories. And, as the podcast mentions, it's especially relevant for those working or studying in nonprofits, social enterprises, and related fields. But I'd say it's also valuable for anyone who wants to be a more informed, engaged, and responsible citizen.
Absolutely. It's a tapestry of experiences and beliefs, offering those firsthand accounts of the challenges and the rewards of dedicating your life to creating a better world. It moves beyond the theoretical and shows how individuals have actually made a real difference.
So, to wrap things up, Grassroots Nation really is a goldmine of learning and inspiration. It gives us this direct connection to the experiences and beliefs of people deeply involved in driving social change in India. And what's particularly valuable, I think, is seeing the variety in their approaches. Some work directly at the grassroots, others focus on ecological preservation, and others aim for systemic change through policy. Each path offers important lessons for those of us who want to make a difference, no matter what our field or background is.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to ponder. We've seen different yet interconnected ways to create change, from grassroots organizing to ecological research to influencing government systems. What resonates most with your own understanding of how change happens? And more importantly, why? How might these perspectives, like the community focus of Mari Thekakora, the systemic thinking of Vijay Mahajan, and that integrated approach of Professor Gadgil, how might they shape your own actions in the world regardless of what you do?
That's a great question to consider. If you're curious to hear these stories firsthand and dive deeper into these insightful conversations, I definitely encourage you to check out the Grassroots Nation podcast. You can find it on popular platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This deep dive was just a glimpse into the wealth of knowledge and inspiration they offer.